I'll just give you an introduction to who I am. So then I'm not just a random guy off the street who doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. So I've got I started off as a teacher. I used to teach sports science, and I used to teach cookery. I studied sports science at university, and then I went and did a master's in human nutrition. For the past 7 years, I've worked in product development. I've worked all over Europe, working for some really large companies, creating supplements. For a range of different reasons. So for sports supplements, for skin health, for hair health, and also in the last couple of years, which has become quite a hot topic, is menopause. It's obviously it's something which has been fairly spoken about for years, and then all of a sudden it's becoming more mainstream, which is great, because it should be, and there are options out there to make things easier. So today's session, we are going to go through. I'm going to discuss basic nutrition, so looking at what macronutrients are and how they work in the body. Then we're going to look at dietary approaches, because I know that with menopause, a lot of women suffer with weight management issues, and so we're going to look at how the body works and in relation to dietary approaches. Then also we'll look at body types. So because the body type that you are kind of dictates what types of macronutrients work best for you. So I'll also explain that as well and give you a bit of an indication around that. And then we're going to look at menopause. Obviously, it's pointless me telling you guys what menopause is. I do have to have a slide on that. So I've got what is menopause, the symptoms, etc. And then looking at a few foods that help with menopause, and a few foods that are not very good for menopause. But then also looking at supplements that are in the market, and mainly looking at the ingredients that you should be looking for supplements in the market. So if there's something that's a particular symptom that's causing you an issue, then we can. Then I've got a few. I've identified the ones which we work with mainly, and the ones that we see as being most effective. So then you can get an idea of what, when you're looking at if you're looking to buy any supplement yourself, which ones you should be looking for, which ingredients you should be looking for. Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. It's funny because every time you do this, you always say, "Can you see that?" And I'm sure that you can all see that. But we'll ask the question. Give me a thumbs up. Thank you. Cool. Okay, so we'll get cracking. If at any point you need to, you want to ask any questions, please just come up to you and give me a shout. I'm more than happy to answer as we go through as well. Okay, so we've talked about what the agenda is. So macronutrients. So we're going to look at macronutrients to start off with. Ordinarily, if I was doing a face-to-face session, I would be getting you guys to come up with what macronutrients are. If anybody knows what they are, which I'm assuming some people may do, you can shout out to me if you want. If not, I'll just go through. Anybody?
Protein, carbohydrate.
Yes, very good. Yeah, so the three macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Okay, everybody's heard of them, but the actual term is called macronutrients. And the reason why it's called macro is because we need it in large amounts for our bodies to be able to work. Macronutrients are vitamins and minerals, so that's what we need in very small amounts. Okay. So we'll look at what carbohydrates are. So carbohydrates, they're basically the naturally occurring sugars. There's two types of carbohydrates. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, I'm not going to go into the science of it, but the two types are you have simple and complex, which I'm sure you've heard of those. It's either, you can either call them sugars or starches as well. And the difference between the two, the simple carbohydrates are made up of very, very small molecules. It's like one molecule. So I'll put my little drawing board out here and I'll give you a diagram just to show how it works in the blood. So we can see that. So this is your bloodstream. Very technical here. So simple sugar is like one molecule of energy. And what happens is that disperses very quickly. So that's when you get your blood sugar spike. Okay. So if you have like chocolate or sweets or something, you'll have a blood sugar spike, feel a rush of energy, and then your energy level will drop because it comes beneath the healthy level for your blood glucose. With your complex carbohydrates, low release energy is made up of lots of different molecules. Okay, and that takes a long, long time for it to disperse in the blood. So it gives you energy over a longer period of time. So that's the difference between the two. Okay. I'll be reverting to my whiteboard throughout the session. So I'm gonna have to get used to my crappy drawings, I'm afraid. So the different types, as I said, so the different types, the sugar is the one that will give you a real energy rush, but then your energy levels will drop. And I'll explain how that can impact on your weight as well later on, and how it impacts on fat. Because basically, if you don't use that energy straight away, it tends to fat. It goes into your fat cells, so then it swells your fat cells, and that's how you end up storing weight from having sugars. If you're doing activity within about half an hour after having something like your jellies or something like that, then it's fine. Your body will use that in your muscles, okay, quite quickly. But as I say, if you don't use it for an activity, then your body stores that. So that's your difference between your sugars, your simple and your complex. So here's the example. So you've got your sweets and biscuits, cookies, your white rice. And I mean, in relation to, this is quite an interesting one because people often think that pasta is a healthy food. And it is, if it's brown pasta, it's a complex carbohydrate. It's made up of lots of molecules. But when it's white, so if it's white, say if you have white bread, white pasta, white rice, the grain has been polished so much that it's just a husk. So it actually acts the same as the sugar. So there's very few molecules in there to provide you with energy. So it will give you that sugar spike and drop. Okay. So that's why the white breads and white rice and white pastas are not particularly great for you. In relation to the complex side, you're looking at your whole grain. So the whole grain means that the actual grain itself is complete. So it takes a lot longer for it to break down in the system. So it gives you energy over a long period. So you're not going to get that spike of energy. Okay. On there, you've got potatoes. Sweet potato is better for you than white potato. If you have white potato, it's always good to have the skin with it because the skin slows down the absorption of the white potato is quite quick release. Again, it acts quite similar to sugar, but if you have it with the skin, there's a jacket potato or boiled potato with the skins on, or even wedges or chips, but keep the skin on, it's going to slow down the absorption, so then you don't get the going to talk about fats. So you've got two different types of fats. I'm sorry, one thing I didn't mention with carbohydrates. 1 gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether it's sugar or whether it's starches, it's all 4 calories. And then with your fats, 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. Okay, and you have two different types of fats which you will have heard of. So you've got your unsaturated and your saturated. Again, there's quite a lot of detail on this presentation, but I'm not going to go into the science of it, but you will get the presentation sent through to you, so you'll be able to have a look through it yourself. But fats are really, really important. We need quite a lot of fat within our diet. So it helps with energy. It helps with supporting cell growth. It helps with balancing your hormones as well. Okay. There's the two types. We've got saturated and unsaturated. And old people tend to see saturated fat as an unhealthy fat. Then that does depend on how you eat, and I will explain later on when we look at dietary approaches, because saturated fat is not necessarily as unhealthy as we been led to believe. It's just how you eat it and the different foods that you combine with it that can cause the issues. And obviously your unsaturated fats are the ones that we're encouraged to eat more of. So your omega-3s, which are good for brain health, but also hormonal balancing as well. Temperature control. This is the part that I'm not necessarily going to go into too much detail. So the way to determine whether it's a saturated fat is that it's generally solid at room temperature. Okay, so that's how you know it's a saturated fat. I guess the strange example which is a healthy fat, is coconut oil, which is obviously it's solid at room temperature. It won't be solid this evening because it will be melted, but it's solid at room temperature, but it has a different molecular makeup, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about. So it works differently in the body. So it is actually very healthy, however you eat it. Okay, it enables the body to use it. It enables the body to use it as an energy source very quickly, which is quite unique. It usually takes a long time for the body to start using it. So unsaturated fats. Fats is how much we should be using. So the recommendation is 7 to 10% of your overall calories for the day. But on average in Western society, we have about 15 to 16%. So as I mentioned earlier, it is advisable to reduce the intake of saturated and replace with unsaturated. But when I go through the dietary approaches, I'll mention some of the caveats that can which show that you can actually have the unsaturated. So the unsaturated, this is, again, I'm not going to go into this too much. That's the molecular makeup. These unsaturated, these are the ones that you can get from various vegetables, such as avocados, legumes, nuts, and seeds. So these are your omega-3s. And these are really good for heart health, but also for brain health, as well as lowering your cholesterol levels and your blood pressure. Okay. In Western society, you have so you have omega-6s and omega-3s. Omega-6s you tend to get from a lot of grains, so a lot of breads, and the problem with omega-6s is we have a ratio of about 12 to 1 between 6s and 3, and it needs to be about 6 to 1 to be healthier. So in reality, you should reduce the amount of omega-6s that you're having, because it causes inflammation in the system, whereas your omega-3s reduces inflammation. So omega-3s is a really good one to take for menopause as well. It's a really useful. Should eat fats in moderation because they are high in calories. In reality, for the majority of people, it's recommended that you should have 35% of your calories should come from fat, which seems like quite a high amount, but it's actually it's a healthy amount to maintain the body and enable it to work effectively. If you didn't take fat into your diet, you would cause a lot of issues in relation to your hormones. Your hormones would go crazy, and then your temperature control would go, your energy levels would drop as well. So it is a really important nutrient. Proteins. So proteins are made up of amino acids, which you may have heard of. So forms of amino acids, and you have 20 essential amino acids that you need to get through your food. And basically what proteins are for is to enable the body to repair and recover. So good sources of protein, you've got, again, legumes, nuts and seeds. Meat in general is a good source of protein, poultry, eggs, dairy foods. So the recommended intake, again, this is quite open to interpretation. If you do a lot of training, do a lot of exercise, then there are recommendations that you take 1 gram and above per kilogram of body weight, but on the whole, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, if you can weight that, is usually enough. So for me, I'm 70, 75 kilograms. So I usually have about 2 grams a day just to maintain. So it helps with maintaining muscle mass, helps with the say cellular repair. It's good for the brain as well, and it helps with so cellular repair helps with obviously your joints and the collagen and the between your joints as well, joints and ligaments, and it's a really important nutrient. Right, so I'm going to look at some dietary approaches now. So basically, I've found that when I've done talks in the past that people have heard of lots of different ways of eating or different diets and whatnot. And on the whole, diets are generally quite, they're not overly based on long-term successes. So it's kind of a short-term fix. So we're looking at dietary approaches, and dietary approaches can be a more long-term lifestyle approach. So it's just getting used to how the body works, how your body works. So what works for one person will not work for another. I'll try and go through in a little bit of detail on why that is the case, and you might be able to get some kind of idea of see where you are on the scale, really, on the spectrum of body shapes, and then what kind of macronutrient metabolizes for your body better. So these are the different approaches that we're going to look at, and then at the end I'll mention the different body types, and then you can try and identify which one works best, would work better for you. Okay, so calorie restriction. This is generally something that most people have tried, but it depends on how you do it. Is to the usefulness of it. Because a lot of people will do a large calorie restriction initially, so they're cutting down the amount of calories that they're having, and within the first few days, even the first few weeks, they may well see some great results. But then eventually it will plateau because the body quickly gets to realize and think, Christ, there's not enough calories coming here to sustain your replacing your skin cells, your nails growing, things like that. So all these metabolic processes start to slow down if you're not having enough energy. So if you're having a really restricted calorie diet, say you should be having 2,000 calories a day, you cut down to 1,000 or 500 calories a day. After a few days, your body will think, hell, what's going on? And so it will start to slow itself down. So then that's when the weight loss ceases, because the body slows its metabolic processes down so much that you don't lose any more weight. And that's when people get peed off with it, and then they say, well, what's the bloody point in doing this? And then they fall off the wagon, as it were. And then because the metabolic rate is slowed down, when they start eating as they were before, they put on more weight than they did before. And this is where we see yo-yo dieting. Okay, so it's through too much calorie restriction. There is a healthier way of doing it. So if you were to reduce, so if you worked out what the calorie intake should be, so to do that, it's I mean, you see everywhere, it's 2,000 calories, that's 2,500 for men. I mean, that's really difficult to be able to, it isn't just that. It's based on what your height is, what your weight is, and what your activity levels are. Okay. So I'll put something in an email to Sarah at the end. So I'll put like a a link so you can put your details in and it tells you how much calories you should have a day. So then you can work out what you should be doing. So in reality, what you should do is reduce your calories by probably 250 to 500 calories a day. And by doing that, you can get a really healthy weight loss. You're not going to lose half a stone in a week. You're not going to have a huge weight loss in a very short space of time. What you will do is you will healthily get down. And then when you feel happy with it, you just maintain that calories where you're at. So you don't have to keep reducing all the time. So you can just get to where you need to be. And once you're comfortable with it, stick at it. And there's lots of different apps out there that you can help to track the calories as well. So there's MyFitnessPal is one that a lot of people use. And it's and you don't need to use it all the time. I mean, if you use it to start off with, then you quickly get an idea of what calories are in what product. So then you can, in a few weeks, you can basically just estimate where you're at. So you don't need to keep such a close eye. But it is quite useful. The only issues with it is you can become a little bit obsessed with calorie counting. You can become a little bit obsessed with trying to keep on track with it all. So it depends on what your mentality is like. But for most weight loss or weight management, calorie restriction is what you need to do in some guys. Okay, we'll look at some of the other dietary approaches, so you'll be able to see how we can fit it in with that as well. But it is quite an easy way of doing it, and you don't necessarily need to make massive changes to what you're eating. You just need to make sure that you're fitting within your calorie rate. Intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is something that's become more popular in the last few years. You see, I mean, my Facebook is full of different apps saying to do intermittent fasting, and it's obviously fasting is something that's been it's gone on for thousands and thousands of years. There's a lot of religious practices that do fasting. It also is can be a healthy practice if it's done well. So the idea behind fasting is that it helps the body to so when the body's digesting food all the time, so if you're eating regularly, what happens is your body is working all the time, helping with that digestion. So what happens when you're fasting is you reduce inflammation around the body because it's kind of having a rest. So it gives you the opportunity for your body to rest. And then after a certain amount of time, after 14, 15 hours, the body starts to use body fat as energy. So you start to eat into your own body fat. And the human body contains quite a lot of body fat. So you're not going to run out of it. So it's quite a useful tool. And the beauty of the intermittent fasting one that the majority of people do is something called 16-8. So you fast for 16 hours, then you have an 8-hour window where you can eat. And because you fasted for that all the time, so then you can have your meal during the 8-hour window, you tend not to have as many calories as you would do normally within that window. So again, you're in that calorie restriction window, so then you start to eliminate from that. So it can be quite a useful way of working. The only issue with it is if you have sugary foods within that, it will cause glucose spikes. So it's not ideal for people who are diabetic. It's not ideal for say if you have sugary foods. It can cause body fat storage, which I'll go through when I'm talking about high carbohydrate diet over the next few. But yeah, so within this presentation, as you can see on here, you've got pros and cons on each results. You can have a look through this. It facilitates weight loss through calorie restriction. It helps promote HGH, which is human growth hormone, that helps with cellular repair because your body's not busy doing other things, and it can help to reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. If you're pre-diabetic, it can be quite a useful one, but if you're diabetic, it probably needs to. The low carb, high fat. I used to work for a company where we developed diabetes programs for the NHS, and we used to deliver them to pre-diabetic people suffering with type 2 diabetes. And the low carb, high fat is a very useful way of reducing the risk of diabetes. And when we first introduced it to people, they were shocked because this is where saturated fats don't necessarily make a difference, and in fact they can be quite healthy. So I'll do another drawing. I'll use my blanket that I'll keep myself warm with. Right, so here's your bloodstream again. Okay, so when I look at the carbohydrate and high carbohydrate based diet, I'll explain how that needs to work. So when you have a high carb diet, you need to eat every 3 hours because your glucose levels start to drop for 3 hours. So if you eat, say that's breakfast, then after 3 hours you're starting to flag, then you'd need to have snack there, and then 3 hours later lunch, 3 hours later another snack. So what tends to happen is people don't do that. So the majority of people in Western society have a high carbohydrate based diet. So they may have breakfast, then the glucose levels drop. So by the time they get to lunch, they're feeling tired and exhausted. Now, because they have a high carbohydrate based diet there, what happens here is the body releases a lot of insulin because you're eating a high carb diet. So then it shoots through, your glucose levels shoots through. So the body releases a lot of insulin to try and bring that back down. What insulin is, it's a fat hormone regulator. So at that point, all the calories that you have here goes to your fat cells and starts to store. And then in the afternoon, you start to feel lethargic and tired again. So then you reach for a chocolate bar or something to keep you going, and then that gives you another spike. So then you've got another fat storage point. So that's what tends to happen with a lot of people in Western society. So the idea is, if it's a high carb diet, you eat every 3 hours to make sure that your glucose levels aren't dropping, and then that keeps your energy levels up. Yeah, and you don't start craving the crappy food either, because when you drop down here, that's when you start to crave sugar and fat because you're feeling tired and lethargic. Okay, on a high fat diet, because you're not having these spikes, because you're not having glucose in your system, your energy levels, so your energy levels are consistently down here. Okay, so your blood glucose levels don't go high or low, so you're not getting any fat storage. So with your high fat diet, fat actually, I say that there's 9 calories in fat, so it fills you up very quickly. So you tend not to eat quite as much of it as well. And with saturated fat, it does contain a lot of healthy elements to it, so it can actually help with heart health. But the problem is, if you have saturated fat with carbohydrates shoot your glucose levels up, and then it stores in your fat cells with the saturated fat, and that's when you can get your cardiovascular issues from having carbs and saturated fat together. So with the issue, with saturated fat, there was a study in the 50s that was done between Kellogg's and Coca-Cola, paid for it actually, and the results showed that carbohydrates, so sugars and refined carbohydrates and saturated fat together is what can cause an issue. But because it was Coca-Cola and Kellogg's who paid for the research to kind of hid the carbohydrate part, and they just demonized saturated fats. So that's why saturated fats have been under the microscope for so many years, has been bad for your health. So they're not necessarily bad for your health. It's just how you eat them and when you eat them. So obviously, if you have a piece of toast with butter on, you've got your saturated fat and your carbohydrates. So that's not great. If you had, for example, some I don't know, steak with vegetables, and you put butter on that, then it would be absolutely fine. So it's how you do it, really. So it's quite strange, but it is. So saturated fat is not as bad as people make out. It's just the way it's been portrayed in the media for the last 70 years. Okay, so if we just look at this, so the idea of the high fat diet is you don't get any blood glucose spikes, so then your fat storage doesn't happen. And then what happens is your body starts to utilize its own body fat for energy, so it converts it into ketones, which I'm going to talk about the keto diet later, which is a little bit more extreme than this one. So on a low carb diet, you usually have about 50 to 65% of calories from fat, and then the rest is made up, so about 25% from protein, and then 10 to 15% from carbohydrates. So it's quite a minimal amount. Okay. It is effective for weight loss. And when I used to deliver it for the when I helped to develop it and then deliver it for the pre-diabetics, weight loss was amazing. Over a 6-week period, we saw some huge changes. But the best thing was that the blood glucose levels of people, on the whole, 87% of people's blood glucose levels reduced. So it was a massive success. The issue with it is, to start off with, you can feel really lethargic and tired, because basically your body's going from having a carbohydrate-based diet where your muscles and your liver is using the carbohydrates for energy, and then you're trying to change over to like another energy system within the body. So you can feel tired, headachy first week or two. Then you do feel better after that. And then also it can lead to it can be quite hard to do when you're out and about and things like that, because, as you know, if you're going eating a meal everywhere has carbohydrates. Everyone's got chips, or it's chip, rice, pasta, bread. So it's very difficult to be able to do unless you're willing to go in the restaurant to change chips for vegetables. It's quite a hard one to maintain. Changing chips and vegetables doesn't really seem to be peaceful. Going out for a meal, see what to do. Okay, so then the next one we're going to look at is ketogenic, and that's basically it's very similar to the high part, but it's a little bit more extreme, so it works quicker. So in effect, what happens is you're changing your body from using glucose as energy to using ketones as energy. It does is it often your body burns very quickly, so then you become what's known as heat adapted. Well, the amount of carbohydrates you're allowed to have is something like 30 grams a day, which is that's like a third of a banana. So again, it's really hard to be able to manage and to be able to identify what you're having. I remember, I think it was Jerry Halliwell did this a few years ago when she looked at Spice Girls, and she got really ripped and slim. Then it also gives you horrendous breath. So but it is a hard one to be able to manage, because you've got to be on it all the time. So as soon as you have something which has more carbs in than you expect, it takes you out of this fat burning zone. So then it takes a while to get back into it. So again, it's another one that's difficult to be able to manage. So the pros and cons, And once you get into using ketones as energy, you have your cognitive function works really well. So you have a real clarity and focus. Initially, as I mentioned with the high fat one, it does for the first week or so, you do feel a bit crappy, and they call that the keto flu. And it's basically when you're changing from one energy system to the other. But you do get through that, and then after that, you do feel very good. Because I'd done I was delivering the high fat one for the diabetes people. I tried it myself because I thought I'm not going to talk about something that I've not experienced myself, and I found that it worked really well for me. For my body type, it worked really well, and I lost. I dropped a lot of body fat, and so I do a lot of exercise and whatnot, and I went from, I've always been about 15-12% body fat. I went to about 7%, and I had like a 6-40 or so. I was, bloody hell, what's going on here? So it can be really useful, but it depends on who you are. It doesn't work for everybody. Again, we'll talk about different body types and which ones would work for you. Yeah, one of the things, it has been linked to helping to reduce cancer. And one of the reasons why, and prevent cancer, and one of the reasons why is because of in the diet, they have very anti-inflammatory. Okay, so when you're having a lot of, like I mentioned before, when you're having a lot of omega-6s from having the breads and the pastas, etc., that causes inflammation in the body, and that can lead to oxidized cells and becoming cancerous or more prone to become cancerous. Whereas if you're having a lot of omega-3s, which is in fat, it helps to reduce that because it's anti-inflammatory. And strangely enough, a lot of people will find a reduction in the cholesterol level. And again, something quite contradictory to what we've been told before. By eating a lot of fat, your cholesterol can go down. As I mentioned before, having the carbohydrates and fats together, that's when it causes the issue with cholesterol. Okay, so paleo diet, it's maybe not as popular as it was a few years ago. For example, what we ate is when we were hunter-gatherers. It was based on a lot of nuts, seeds, vegetables, but also meats, and healthy fats and oils. It can be a very clean diet, so it can be very healthy. Although it's bloody expensive, because if you try and look to any of the books or any of the recipes, it's always grass-fed this and organic that and wild caught, and it can be it's a little bit pretentious, I think, is a paleo diet, but it can be quite useful, and you can amend it to how you want to do it. But yeah, I mean, it can be quite restrictive as well, especially if you're going up to weight, because you don't necessarily know what's going on. High protein, which is basically, as it says, high protein, so it enables obviously it helps with the cellular repair and recovery and maintenance of muscle mass. But eating protein also keeps you fuller for longer, so you're not. So it leads to a calorie restriction, because you tend to feel more full, so you don't want to keep snacking and keep eating more. And it can help to boost your metabolism, so speed up your metabolism and enable more weight loss. It's not ideal for people with kidney issues, because your kidneys have to work quite hard to utilize the protein in your system, and then it gets rid of it. So you've also got to be aware of the amount of fat to eating quite a high protein diet, because it tends to come a lot from meat. So you can get protein, you can get vegan and vegetable protein, but you've got to be aware, if you're doing that, to have a good blend of different plant proteins, so then you get your amino acids. Because one of the issues with vegetarian and vegan protein sources is, say, for example, if you have pea protein, it doesn't have all the essential amino acids, so you have to cross it with another. But nowadays, there's a lot of vegan protein powders out there where they do rice protein, pea protein, and they'll mix them, or soy protein, and they'll mix them together, so then you get that amino acid blend, so it covers off all the essential amino acids that work in the system. Plant-based diets, again, this is a really popular. We've seen a huge increase in the vegan diet over the last few years, but also flexitarian diet as well. So flexitarian is where people are making the choice to not eat meat 2-3 times a week, and they're focusing on more whole foods and vegetables and more legumes, etc. And this is really good for inflammation because you're having a lot of antioxidants, which helps to reduce the inflammation around the body from your vitamins and your minerals. It's also very good for the environment because you're not having meat, which can obviously impact on the CO2 emissions. So then it's not good for the environment. As I mentioned previously, you can get unless you're eating a really balanced vegetarian diet, you can struggle to get your essential amino acids, and you can lack certain micronutrients such as B12, iron, etc. I mean, you can get iron from vegetables, but the issue with that is it's harder for your body to absorb them and to utilize it. So unless you take iron with vitamin C, body won't absorb it. Whereas if you take iron from a meat source, then it absorbs it very easily. It's much more bioavailable. So if you ever get if any of you are on iron supplements, for example, just make sure that that your supplement has vitamin C with it. Otherwise, the body won't absorb it properly. So you need to include vitamin C supplement, or take your iron tablet with a glass of orange juice, for example. So then the body will be able to absorb it better. You'll actually use it a lot better. It'll increase your iron levels. So this is obviously the concept of the high fat diet. So this is basically what the Eat Well guide that the NHS promotes is. So it's predominantly a high carbohydrate diet, which can work if you're doing calorie restriction, but unless you are eating regularly, like I mentioned before, so every 3 hours, and having the right kind of carbohydrates, so the complex carbohydrates on the majority of the time, it's going to, you can come unstuck really. So you've got to be rather careful with that. And so even people who, so quite often we see people may only eat 3 times a day because they've left that longer than 3 hours. So when they do eat, they tend to be really hungry, and then you tend to have an excessive amount of calories, and that's when you get your insulin spike, and that's although you think, well, I've only had a couple of meals a day, or I've only eaten 2 meals a day or 3 meals a day, what tends to happen is you get an insulin spike and fat storage because of that, because you're not eating every 3 hours to regulate your blood glucose levels. Mentioned before, if you don't have a lot of fat in your diet, it can cause real issues with your hormone levels. You've got to be wary of that. So this kind of shows a comparison over a year on the right hand side. So you've got in the space of 6 months, a low carb diet, you tend to see a little bit more weight loss. Over the course of the year, it tends to even itself out. So you're looking at initial weight loss is 9 kilograms over the course of 6 months, and then with the other with a low fat one, you're looking at 8 kilograms. So it's not a massive difference. So again, it's more important on the type of body, your body type, and how your body works with a particular dietary approach. So we have different body types. Okay, we're all on this spectrum somewhere. Okay, so your ectomorph is the kind of person who we all hate, who can eat what they things that they can eat what they want. They can have all the chips in the world and all the chocolate, etc. And then your mesomorph is the more athletic type, and then your endomorph is the more acculturated type, for the ones who store fat quite readily around the midriff. And we're all on that spectrum somewhere. And it's important to try and identify where you are, because it's not that body type that leads, that is what shows what kind of plan we should be, or what types of foods we should be eating. And the reason why the ectomorph is so the ectomorph is the one who can eat as much as they want, or so it seems. The reason why they don't put on any weight is because their bodies metabolize carbohydrates very quickly, and because as we mentioned before, in Western society, it's predominantly a very heavy carbohydrate-based diet. The majority of the things that we're having, so they're having a bed, and they might have some fat in there, but the majority of it is the bun. You're having chips, you're having chocolate, you're having sweets, and they're not putting on any weight because their body uses that very quickly as energy. So it comes through, and they're not storing that carbohydrate or glucose in the body. It's just getting used as energy very quickly. So the mesomorph is the one who stores, who gains muscle very quickly, who's very athletic. And the reason why they do that is because the body can utilize protein more effectively. It metabolizes proteins really quickly, and so it can store it so the muscle mass builds very quickly and help the cellular repair. And then the endomorph. So this is why the Eat Well guide has caused more issues in relation to, there's more people with diabetes now than ever. There's more obesity than ever, because the people who are getting recommended to follow the Eat Well guide, which is a high carbohydrate based diet, the body doesn't work that well on that diet. Okay, it's the endomorph tends to metabolize fat really effectively. So a high fat diet would work really well. The reason why the NHS sticks with promoting the Eat Well guide is because it's a lot easier to be able to follow. As I mentioned before, eating a high fat, low carb diet is quite hard work and quite difficult to maintain. And if you do it wrong, then the results are even worse, because you'll be having the high fat, which is 9 calories per gram. And if you're having high carbohydrates as well, then you're going to be storing a lot more fat. So that's why it's not really promoted. But a high fat, low carb diet works much more better for the endomorph body shape. And in fact, in parts of Northern Europe, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, their governments are actually promoting this now for treating obesity, because obviously the body types work more effectively this way. That's the end of that part of the session, Chris. I've been going, oh God, it's 5 to, oh sorry, I've been rabbiting on all bloody night. Apologies. Menopause, no to menopause. I don't know do you want me to do another session, Sarah? I don't know whether that would be worthwhile doing.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, if that's okay. I mean, if you, sorry.
I've got another load of slides to go through based on the bottles and ingredients and things like that. So, sorry guys, I've completely gone off topic and I've moved everything on. I'm just a geek when it comes to this stuff. I apologise. I mean, I'm more than happy to do it again next week or something like that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if everyone's okay to attend the second part next Wednesday, that'd be super.
Yeah. So should we do like a Q&A now to cover off the nutrition side, and any questions? I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions at all, and then we can do this part of it next week. Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Can I go first? Do you know the slide regarding the body, the different body shakes and things like that. I find that fascinating, and the way you talk about, obviously, you know, the NHS might promote one way of losing weight, and it's like a whole new way of thinking about losing weight, and I just find it crazy. So this is through science, which is kind of researched into this. Then is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And it works for the majority of people as well. So your body type, you can pretty much align it to a certain way of eating, and it will work because your body works more effectively utilizing those types of foods or those nutrients. Obviously, you will always have the exceptions. So some people it might not work for, but for the majority of people, for example, who are in the endomorph to endomesomorph range, they will generally work a lot better eating a higher fat diet, and they'll find themselves feeling a lot healthier. And the body in itself, the processes, all the functions in the body will work better. Your hair will grow better, your nails will be better, your skin will be better, because all the metabolic processes are more effective. And then it's just, as I say, it's quite remarkable how it works. But the problem that is out there is that it's difficult for people to educate people on it, because they've had such we've been forced into this eat well guide for so long because of the initially it was because of this research about the saturated fats, and that came out in the 50s, and the issue with that, and then they started to do like the food triangle, and now they've developed the Eat Well guide 10, 15 years ago. And because that is quite easy to follow, because you've got a guide and you've got a plate and you can kind of identify and visualize it, it makes it, people can follow it. And if they do have a calorie restriction, they can lose weight with it. It's just that they're not going to lose weight as effectively, and the body's not going to work as effectively. So it can work, but then it's, as I say, it doesn't really fit with that particular individual.